You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast, Episode 10.
Always be true to yourself, even when the natives are throwing spears and rocks at you because you're such a weirdo. Just stay true to yourself and know within yourself that that's who you really are. It's not what people want you to be or you shoulda, coulda, woulda.
You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast.
Life purpose, spirituality, higher calling, personal growth, meaningful life.
We ask the deep questions about living a balanced life of meaning, purpose, and joy.
Passion, know thyself, be mindful, spiritual practice, aha moments, life lessons, balance.
It is time to welcome your host, Angie Swartz.
That's so nice, isn't it? Dr. Stephen Blake is the Pet Whisperer. He's here today to talk to us about life purpose, and the deeper side of spirituality. Dr. Blake has been practicing small medicine for the past 39 years in San Diego, California. He specializes in alternative veterinary medicine, utilizing classical homeopathy, nutrition, glandular therapy, massage, aromatherapy, acupuncture, chemotherapy, all these other things I can't say, and he's going to play a little for us and then tell us a little bit more about himself.
Hey, Angie.
Hello.
Thanks for calling me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's my pleasure to welcome you.
Thank you. It's a beautiful day here in San Diego, as you know, since we live in the same town.
Yes, we're very lucky.
Yeah, so let me just give people a little bit of background on me so they can understand a little bit more why I'm on the show and why I love to share. So the first thing was the flute. I took up about 6 years ago, just happened to run into one up in Alaska, never seen one. I just self-taught, and now I have 6 or 7 of them, and I play them all over the world, which you can find on my website, www.thepetwhisperer.com, ERER.com. I have hundreds of YouTubes and all kinds of stuff on natural healing. Of course, my flute's in there somewhere for everything. My journey started when I hit the planet. almost 68 years ago in the laboratory of life. And at 5 or 6, my mother said, I came up to her and told her I want to be a doctor. I don't remember that, but that's the story. And so time passed, and I didn't really like going to school that much, but I realized early on that in order to get a degree, I would have to perform in the theater of academia. So it was pretty easy. I just had to show up and do what I was supposed to do, and even though it was somewhat boring. Got into undergraduate, and luckily I had a wonderful girlfriend who then became my wife, Charlene, in my 3rd year at undergraduate. She taught me about responsibility, so I started applying myself. As a consequence of that, I also at that time decided I didn't want to be a doctor. So I'd already done 2 years of pre-med, and I didn't know really what I was going to do. And my lab partner, Joe, says, well, why don't you be a veterinarian? And I said, are you kidding? What do I want to be a veterinarian? I was always going to be a doctor. He said, well, just give it a shot. So I went off campus, volunteered for a local veterinarian, and right away I was like, I knew I was home. Then I found out it's harder to get into vet school than it is medical school. So I'd already kind of coasted too much my first 2 years at the university, so I had to turn up the amp and actually show up to class and do all the things you need to do to get a 4.0. So I did that and got the 4.0 next 2 years, and then I applied, and luckily I was accepted because there were 1,800 applicants for 80 positions. So it was really tough in those days. That was 1969. Anyway, so I went on to veterinary school. That was another 4 years of professional school. I get out, pass my boards. I'm able to get a job here in California. And I start working, and after 7 years, I decided to go out on my own. So we took the big leap and hawked everything and started to practice in 1980. And it wasn't long after that I started getting ill. Not really sick, but just not well. And so I was told to go to a medical doctor who, as the universe, which never makes any mistakes, sent me to a homeopathic physician, which I'd never even heard of. And he immediately diagnosed me as pesticide poisoning. He said what was happening is I was absorbing the chemicals from the dogs, because back in those days, we dipped them in Dursban, malathion. These are heavy chemicals for fleas and ticks. Well, anyway, I was absorbing all that stuff, and it was making me sick. And so I barely started my new practice. He told me you should quit because you're going to die before you're 30-some years old. So I just thought, well, what if I just tell everybody they can't use chemicals, and then I'll wing it from there, because all I was taught is chemicals in my education. So anyway, I told my staff, tell them they can't come and see me anymore unless they quit using chemicals, and see what happens. And so we put everything on red and spun the wheel, and luckily most of my clients wanted to try something different. So then I spent the next, well, now it's been 41 years, studying different modalities, some of which Angie already mentioned. And along that path came my spiritual path as well, because the animals, because of what happened to my health, introduced me to a whole different level of mind, body, spirit concept. Instead of a Newtonian approach, which I was taught, I was looking at quantum being light, energy, and that path is mind, body, spirit. And that lesson that I gained from being with the animals, as I've said many, many times when people ask me, you know, what do you aspire to attain in this life? And I say to reach the spiritual level of a dog, because the spiritual level of a dog is pretty dang high, let me tell you. Humans are on the bottom, animals are next, and plants are on top. And if you can get to the dog level, you're doing really good. With the dog, or any of the animals, they live in the now, and that's what, for the next 30-some years, they did their best to teach me. That led me down many, many paths, lots of bumps, lots of highs and lows. It wasn't always easy. Whenever you step out of the box and not going along with the herd, then things get a little bumpy, because people tend to be, let's just say, not as mindful about their comments and how they treat you, aka lose your license to practice, lawsuits. Different things can happen to you because you're not like everybody else. So that was not so foreign to me, because I've always been, let's just say, I never really felt comfortable going along with status quo. Been my whole life, been like that. So I'm the one that always asks why. The animals are one of the great white teachers of all times. And with that being said, the more I listen to them, and then not even more importantly, the more I practice what they taught me, it made my journey that much more peaceful. That brings us to how I met Angie, which was at Unity, and that's another story, but actually prompted by animals that got me there again, because I'm only like 5 minutes from that center. Yet I've lived in this neighborhood for 41 years. So it's just an interesting journey how we get to this point. So when Angie asked me to be on the show, I thought, of course, you know, I love Angie and what she's promoting in the world of peace and love. And so here I am, and I know she has a bunch of questions she wants to ask me, so I'm here to do my best.
Oh, you say such nice things. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know everyone out there listening would love to hear, what is it like to be a pet whisperer? What does that feel like to be able to communicate with an animal? How does that work? And do you think everybody could do that at certain levels?
That question has been asked many times over the years. And actually, in the early days, 30 years ago or so, or well, at least that, I always had a feeling. I never heard anything, but when I came in the presence of an animal and they were ill or they needed help or whatever, I just had a feeling about what it is they really wanted me to do. And then as I learned these other skills, I became more skillful in the sense that I had more tools in my little medical box, and I could listen finer and finer and fine-tune what it is they were asking me to do for them. For a long, long time, it's always been a feeling. And then about 15 years plus or minus ago, a new client said to me, "You're the cat whisperer." I said, why do you say that? And she said, because the questions you ask and what you say about my cat, the only way you could do that is if you actually knew you were communicating with the cat. I told her, well, I don't hear anything. I just have feelings. So anyway, she tagged me the cat whisperer, and then I thought about it, and I thought, well, it sounds like all they do is treat cats, and I treat everything from lizards to horses to elephants to giraffes, anything. I'll treat anything, even humans. That's a real stretch. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Humans are great. They're my brothers and sisters, and as Eric Butterworth, one of my teachers, said, there's no evil in the world, only unrevealed good. So that's how I look at all creatures, great and small. But anyway, so that was the tag, and I changed it to the Pet Whisperer because I started a newsletter at that time and a little website about 15 years ago or so. And what prompted that was I saw a movie. The title was "Pay It Forward" with Helen Hunt and Kevin Spacey, and it was about a little boy who was 10 years older. So he's in middle school, and he was asked by his teacher, Kevin Spacey, to come up with a plan to save the world. Had 2 weeks to figure it out. So if you've seen the show or if you watch it, he came up with this idea, and he's up in front of the class at the blackboard putting a little square on top, and then he puts 3 squares down from that, and then 3 squares off each of those squares. So Kevin Spacey gets impatient. He says, well, what are all these boxes? He goes, well, I'm the first box, and I'm going to help 3 people, and then I'm just going to ask those 3 people to help 3 more people, and nothing in return except help 3 people. So if everyone did that over time, everyone would be helping each other, and we'd save the world. So that was the gist of the movie. So I went home and I thought, that's what's missing. I would do this one-on-one every day with animals and people, and it's so frustrating because I just hear the same thing over and over. People, they just don't know. They don't know what healing is or how to help their animals. So I was on AOL, and they had a little tiny 1 megabyte of make your own web page, which was very, very primitive. But I made it anyway, and then I had 6 email addresses, so I sent it out to 6 people and told them it was paying it forward. So that started off with 6, and now there's thousands of people that I communicate around the world, and I do it all free. I just send it out, whatever knowledge I have that I can share, and then I ask them to do the same thing. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 15 plus years. To be a pet whisperer, really, I believe everyone, when you're born, hears plants, animals, trees, your mother and father. You hear everything inside of you. It's just a knowing without knowing, and you just do it on automatic. Then as you get older and you learn words, then the words kind of tell you don't need to exercise that muscle anymore. So you just kind of just forget how to use it. Some people don't. Some people continue on, not very many, a few. I let it go because I didn't know. And then once I became a veterinarian, I woke again inside of me this feeling thing, but it wasn't auditory. Some animal communicators say, oh, I hear this and that and so forth. That really wasn't my experience until in the past few years. Actually started with a whale down in San Ignacio Lagoon. I called him Louie, and I had communication with him, and it was just out of nowhere. I mean, he was laying on a cot in a tent in the desert next to a lagoon with a bunch of grays breathing outside my tent. And then I heard this in my head. At first I thought I was just making it up, but after a while I realized I was actually communicating with this whale. And then as time's gone on, I've been more open to it, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens periodically as far as the auditory. But the feeling thing I've had forever, and I do believe all of us have it. And if you practice more of a meditative life and the spiritual mindfulness of Zen Buddhism kind of philosophy, it helps to get all that noise out of the way so you can hear again. And that's when you start communicating through your feelings with all life, whether it be a rock or a leaf or a cute little puppy. It just allows that already knowing within you ability to express itself again. And the more you get out of the way, the easier it gets. And then after almost 68 years of doing this stuff, it's come very, very easy for me, but not the auditory. The auditory is just special. It only comes when it's supposed to. The rest of it is just what it is, and I'm just grateful to be able to share that with anybody.
For those of you who have never met Dr. Blake, he's mentioned a couple times about 68 years. But if you see him in person, he's very vivacious, You would guess maybe he's closer to 16 than 68 based on how he lives his life and his interests and a very adventurous spirit, which we'll talk more about. So the purpose that we're here, Dr. Blake, tell me, do you know what your life purpose is?
I shared it a little bit earlier, to reach the spiritual level of the dog.
To reach the spiritual level of the dog.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, and as we know, dog is God spelled backwards.
Very good.
Yes, and so as God is in all of us, and that's our teaching, is that for all of us to attain that oneness, that we're all one. I use the dog because the dog has been part of my life forever, and my teacher, but it's all the animals and plants and everything that teach us that. But the goal I have is that what the Dalai Lama has said, he said, the only reason we're here is to learn to be joyful and happy. And then when he was asked, how do you do that in a world like the world we live in today? He said, have compassion. And that was pretty much the end of the interview, and Diane Sawyer was horrified. I could see her eyes. She was thinking an hour with the Dalai Lama, and he just said his purpose and how to do it in 2 words, and I'm stuck with sitting here looking at this smiling gentleman. And I could see her flipping through her notes, and I could just read her mind, and I also read the Dalai Lama. So he was very mindful and kind, so he started just sharing ideas whether to fill the hour. So that's how simple it really is to find that happiness within yourself, that actually all the spiritual paths that are out there with different names on them, all are teaching you the same thing, is to really get in touch with your inner being, your inner self, your spirit, who you really are. And then once you do that, then as I tell my grandkids, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It's their story. Your story is your own.
Was there any time in your life when you weren't aware of this purpose?
Oh, yes. A long time.
About what age did you get to this point?
Oh, well, to the point we're just talking about, I would say probably maybe almost 60 years of age. I mean, I had a love for life, and I enjoyed all, different. I've always been very adventurous, and I always appreciated nature, but not at the level we're talking about now, because I didn't understand the oneness concept. I only understood that, about conservation and, all the physical stuff we talk about, but I really didn't understand the oneness concept until I was probably, maybe 58. Years old, around that time. It wasn't that I went from, it wasn't a black or white thing. It was just a gentle transition of an aha moment. And the aha moment hit me, and actually I was trying to remember, dates are not something I'm really good on. I was very good at it in the schools because I loved history, so I would just have no trouble memorizing dates. But when it comes to myself, I tend to just the idea that we're a thought that's billions of years old, it's like, what's 10 years or 60 years or whatever. It's kind of, as you get further along this path, you realize time is something we made up.
Right.
Say between 50 and 60. That's a good, we'll just throw it in there somewhere. Anyway, I had an aha moment, and actually what it was is I was walking, carrying the recycling in one hand and the garbage in the other hand out to my little recycling center in my yard, and I was walking, thinking of 10 different things, which I always did, tasks, because I was a multitasker. I could jump out of bed from a sound sleep. You could hand me a scalpel and I could do surgery. That's how quick I moved around in my mind and my body. But there's a caveat to that. You're always going at light speed, and you're kind of missing out on the wind, the gentle wind, the breath of the angel's wings behind the wind. You just don't notice these subtle things. Anyway, so I'm walking along, and all of a sudden, I heard a voice say, stop. So I just stopped, holding these 2 bags, and then I heard a voice say, listen. And I listened, and I heard the rustling of the tree. Now I got a timeline. This was before the house burned down in 2003. So this is pre-2003. Anyway, so I hear the rustle of the palm leaves, which are 30 feet over my head. And the more I listened, the more things I started hearing. Kind of like in the Kung Fu movie, the little grasshopper, you hear the cricket and blah, 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 which I love that stuff. But anyway, so I started realizing all of these things. And what hit me at that moment was, I called it the 10% rule. That's what came into my head. It said to me, slow down your thoughts and your physical actions by 10% and see what happens. So I did that, and I walked slower, and then I realized the moment at that point that I'd finally found out what the moment is. And the moment simply is the now. Not what you're going to do tomorrow, not what you did yesterday, not what you're going to do in the next second, just that next step. And so when that hit me, I was just blown away. It took a while, because when you're a practiced expert PhD in multitasking like I was, I got a 4.5 in that grading scale. It drove my partners crazy. They'd be working on one task, and I'd be juggling 15 balls at one time. And I thought that was just the way to do it. It worked really well. I get a lot of stuff done. Then that's when I realized that famous quote, the journey, success is not the destination, it's the journey. So I'd heard that a long time ago, but I never really saw the application. And then once I had this little aha moment, I call it the 10% rule, then I started practicing that over and over, catching myself when I was trying to jump to the next task or whatever, or when I was not paying attention, listening. And so then, as you know, the teacher appears when the student's ready. So then a whole bunch of new teachers appeared in my life. Things like Buddha, Albert Einstein, Gandhi, just a whole bunch of the masters started popping up. So I started reading and studying with them, and that helped me to the learning curve. Eckhart Tolle showed up. He taught me what listening is, which I thought I had a pretty good idea. But he taught us that listening is when one is engaged in listening with another being, that you have no thoughts, emotions, or reactions to the words that you're hearing. You're totally just listening. Because once you start having any of those three, you're not listening anymore. You are listening over them or talking over them. Or as the Indians say, one cannot listen if one does not stop moving one's lips. I could just see Tolle sitting there smiling with his little elfish grin. As I've watched him over the years and studied him, I understand more and more that look that he gives everybody. It's not condescending, it's not judgment, it's just pure joy of being. That being said, that when I'm, like right now with us sharing, when you speak, that's all I hear is your voice. I try not to do any thoughts, emotions, or reactions to it. And I don't mean that I'm not empathetic to it. I just mean that in respect, out of respect to you, I only hear your words. I'm not thinking about that my grandson's going to be born in a few days, which is Hart Jackson. He's going to pop out here in a few days, my sixth grandchild. But during our conversation, like I'm right back with you now. And so when I'm with you, my words are, that's all I'm sharing is my words, no other thoughts, actions, or emotions. And then when I hear you speak, I do the same in respect for you.
I was in a room with Eckhart Tolle a few years ago. I had a similar experience to what you're talking about, but he did a guided meditation for a large room of Silicon Valley technology folks in San Francisco. And I was very interested to hear him speak. I'd read his work and listened to a lot of his videos. And he did maybe about a 40-minute meditation. And what he did was talked about the details of the room, like to the nth degree. So he took everyone into a somewhat meditative state, but illustrating exactly what you're talking about. Like it wasn't about him, about his life, about what he wanted anyone to do. It was about very deliberately taking the whole room into a very present space, because as you said, that's all there really was.
That's why I love Eckhart. That's why he's a master. And a master, people tend to think that's someone you bow down to or something. But a master is just an old word for teacher. And he is an excellent teacher because he practices to the best he can his teaching. And that's all you can do. The actual definition of teaching is the teacher, the Buddha, if you will, the taught, which would be the student, the listener, and then the teaching. So if he gets up, the master, the teacher, the Buddha, and he teaches a lesson, a dharma, and you listen, but you never do anything with it, there was absolutely no teaching. Mm-hmm. So for the teacher, the master, his joy comes from when he actually sees the complete cycle. And that's why when he did that example, I had the same experience I've been going to the Deer Park Buddhist Monastery up in Escondido now for over a year and a half and learning their practice and studying with them. And mindfulness is the practice. Mindfulness, would be an example, would be what we were just talking about, listening. So you could do a whole thing on mindful listening. I just gave you the first little baby steps into the mindfulness of listening, but their practices are mindfulness of walking, mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of eating. Each thing taken to pretty superficial. I mean, there's not a lot of words. It just breaks it down just to get your awareness of what you're doing. So what I've done is I've written 3 pieces or 4 pieces now on it. One's on my website. If you go to my website, thepetwhisperer.com, and I have categories, you can type in mindful healing. And I wrote a 2-page thing on mindful healing because nothing was ever written on it. None of the Buddhists that I'm reading, I couldn't find anything on it. So I wrote a piece called Mindful Healing. And it's kind of like what Eckhart did in that. He just took it and broke it down to its simplest atom. I did the same thing with healing to the best that I could. And I'm sure I'll be morphing that thing over the years, but it was a flow of consciousness where I just sat down. I was actually in the Andes. I was trekking in the Andes, and that's when it came to me. And so I had the modern technology. I had my iPad in Cusco. That sounds so funny. And so the words came to me while I was trekking in the Andes. And when I got back to Cusco, I just sat down and I wrote the whole thing within just an hour or so. It didn't take very long to write it. And then it's been edited a few times because I don't like to edit. I think I told you that before, Angie. I love to write, but editing just gets in the way of my creativity. So I just spew it out. I do spell check. And then I turn it over to Charlene and then whoever else wants to fool around with it to get it cleaned up. Because some people get hung up on punctuation and grammar and all that, and I just find all of that just gets in the way of my way of sharing. But I respect that. My mindfulness is some people, you could have the most beautiful poem or thought on the planet, but if the one bit of punctuation's out, they get stuck on the pimple on the guy's nose. So they meet the guy and everyone's happy, and then later on, hey, what'd you think of that guy? And the person goes, who? I don't know who you're talking about. And she said, you mean the guy with the pimple on his nose.
Right.
Yeah, all they remember is the zit. They forgot the beauty of the spirit or the meaning of the words or the feelings or that deeper spiritual expression. They're so hung up on the planet. I'm not being judgmental. It's just a human condition. It's just a human condition. And we've been trained that way for tens of thousands of years. So being mindful of that is my job. I am trying to be respectful of that. So instead of me going, I don't care, which I really don't, about the creating of it, but being mindful of others' feelings and to make it easier for them to understand my words and not have that get in the way of the sharing, then that's why that's important, is to be mindful of that.
I want to go back just a minute about what you said about Deer Park Monastery, if that's okay with you.
Oh, that'd be fine.
For those of you listening that don't know about Deer Park Monastery, the monastery is related to Thich Nhat Hanh. And Dr. Blake, I've seen you many Sunday mornings at church where you've been up at dawn and you've already been up to Deer Park Monastery, and you've told me stories about playing your flute with some of the monks and spending time there. I'm interested to know, combined with what you said about your trekking in the Andes, I know you're a big traveler, a big adventurer. Talk to us a little bit about your daily practice and how these things are a part of that.
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. I just love Deer Park Monastery for many, many reasons. But another aha moment was when I was introduced to Thich Nhat Hanh, through a book. His book, it's a little blue book. Mine's all beat up. Peace in Every Breath. Peace in Every Breath. Anyway, a friend of mine sent it to me anonymously, but I know who it was. He knows me really well. I started reading this book about a year and a half ago, and immediately, as soon as I started reading, I go, oh my God, I know all this stuff. I remember. And I got on the internet and on Facebook, which I love to share on, as you know. Anyway, so I get on there and I post something I just read, and all of a sudden I get an email back from one of my friends. He says, are you kidding me? He has a monastery 25 minutes from your house. So as soon as I read it, I jumped in the car and drove up there. And the gate was locked and I couldn't get in, blah, blah, blah. So I went on home and looked up the site, and it's only open on Thursdays and Sundays sometimes to the public. So, of course, I went back the next day because it was Thursday. And that's how it started. I just started going there, usually on the Thursday or Sunday. And the Sunday practice has been 5 in the morning, generally. I'll drive up. That's when the monks rise, wake in the morning. I'll try and get up there around 5. It's absolutely quiet and still. And then I just do their practice. Prayer for an hour, silent prayer, Dharma hall, then an hour of silent eating, and then an hour of silent walking, and then we can talk in between and stuff, but it's a lot of stillness and quiet. Anyway, I started doing that. It was magic. It was the aha moment. There's certain things in your life. Of course, the biggest aha was meeting Shireen. If it wasn't for my wife, I would be on this. I would not be here, literally. So she was the biggest aha. And then since that time, I've had other aha moments, and many of them. And this book, and meeting Ty, I got to meet him in October last year, is the next quantum leap as far as my spiritual growth.
Why was that so impactful?
It took me to a deeper awareness, their mindful practice. Like, I really started getting in touch with, as Ty says, you're enlightened when you can see the universe in an orange. That's such a powerful statement. You know you're enlightened when you can see the universe in an orange.
And what does that mean, seeing the universe in a piece of fruit, an orange is what you're saying?
Yeah,
right?
those are I'm just quoting his words. And it could be a leaf, a grain of sand, a heartbeat, a breath. What he means is you realize that you are one of every atom in the universe. You're one with every atom in the universe. So they're all communicating, all connected. So when I look into the orange or whatever, I see and feel all the atoms of the universe. You're no longer limited to this physical body. You're just one with everything that is. He calls it, this is it. So it is hard to put it in words until you actually experience the stillness, the quiet, the inner, he calls it the inner being, the self. Words just pale. All I can say is that reading his book and then making this my practice now for, over a year and a half, is that each time I repeat the practice over and over and over again, I do it all the time, is that I'll find another level, deeper level of being this oneness concept. And you can do it as you become more practiced at it. According to them, you can meditate in your sleep. I haven't reached that level yet, but I'm working on it. This meditative concept is where you're truly one with all that is. And that means there's no separation of mind or body. They call it duality. We're taught in our Newtonian thinking of a duality of mind and body are separate. And that duality or Newtonian way of thinking has caused us to separate from self. And once you do that, you're just lost. Even if you don't know it, you are a ship without a rudder. Once you rediscover that, there is no duality and you are one with all that is, God within, whatever you want to use, then your rudder, you got your rudder back and you can stay on that path. And like the song goes, it goes something like this. On the holy road to the universal mind, I found everything I was looking for. I find happiness. There was nothing else to seek. Something like that. It's those kind of words. Like I said, you can't really explain it in words very well, and that's why the Buddha was silent. When the Buddha was asked, what is enlightenment, Master? He looks at all his students. He says, that without suffering. So they went back and they studied that for a while. That without suffering. So after a while, it drove them crazy. So they came back and they said, well, Buddha, if there's no suffering, what is there? By that I mean suffering is the monkey mind, thoughts about past and future, blah, blah, blah. That's what they meant that's what he meant. So then when he was asked, well, what is there without suffering? On that, the Buddha was silent. So if you read that, you might think, oh, he didn't know. But yes, he did. He knew, but there are no words to describe that. What that is. That without suffering, there's no word for that. It's just something you experience. And then in another, in a light form or a spirit form, I'm sure we can express it, but it's not words. It's at a different level. So that's kind of a long answer to the orange question, but that's the best way I can explain it.
I love the way that you're relaying how certain things are in your awareness, but you don't really understand it quite yet. And because this really seems to happen with everyone that I've spoken to in layers. And that's the first step, knowing that there is something out there that you might not feel in your body or your soul or your spirit, but you're aware of it, and then you pursue it and get to another level with it. It brings great hope for all those people out there that are just beginning or thinking about beginning a path.
Yes, it's, that thing about hope. Well, hope's kind of wishfulness and stuff like that. It really goes beyond that. It's just like Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. He said, knowing is not knowing. I read that some years ago, and I studied it for about a year. I guess there's 70 so things in the Tao Te Ching. And they're basically just his thoughts, very simply put, but very deep. So the more you read them, it goes down and down and down. See a simple phrase like knowing is not knowing. And that is so foreign to the human condition. We're all about why, how. We're always doing that, as opposed to a simple analogy would be, before Newton discovered the mathematical equation of gravity, no one fell off the earth. That's how I teach it. When I teach it, I do that, and then I'll use other examples with the animals. But that's a simple concept of the laws of nature are constant. They don't need a why. They just are. This is it. And the sooner you get over that why thing, because the why gets in the way of the knowing and that you already know, and the understanding that just is inherent in all of us. And that's the power of being still, is that when you're still, that's when you get the answers to what you're looking for, or in a kind of biblical way of prayer. We pray, and like the Reb says, as the Unity says, get off your affirmation and pray. So then you start praying, but she says usually you pray when you're between a rock and a hard place, and then that goes off into you're actually not making it part of your practice. That's why I was saying earlier, the sooner you can take care of yourself, and that's the big message I would like to leave with everybody, is in our culture, in many cultures, we've been taught that you're to take care of everyone else, and to take care of yourself is selfish. That's kind of maybe unsaid or said, but it's in there. Dig down, you'll find it. And so what happens is, giving is a natural thing in us all. Giving to take care of ourselves is kind of foreign because we've been taught that it's not our purpose. But if you can't care for yourself and love yourself, as far as I'm concerned, you cannot love or care for other people. So when the Buddha or any of the masters say, have compassion, is have compassion for yourself and all creatures, great and small, and you're one of them.
Such a rich conversation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I want to ask you a speed round of questions, but before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about how adventure and traveling plays into your practice?
Well, I've always been a nomad at heart. So I'm always, even before I had enough money to go somewhere, I was running out in the desert with no water and experimenting and stuff where I lived in Yuma, Arizona, and doing all kinds of things. Like I was more of a Robinson Crusoe, Huckleberry Finn kind of kid. And that's just the way I've lived my life. And with having children and grandchildren and wife and practice, I'll, like other people, I have lots of responsibilities. But I do my very best to make time for myself or together with my wife. Some of these trips are just me because not everybody wants to be 10 below zero in a little tent up at 16,000 feet. So when I'm doing these things, I am totally in the moment. I mean, I'm running barefoot up and doing some, let's just say mindful. You have to be very mindful because you can get hurt. And so it teaches you to really be in tune with your body and all your surroundings. All I can say is it heightens I call it joy of being.
And what's your motivation there's really no need to answer after saying and heightens your joy of being. Is that the reason what are you doing when you're out there?
I'm being mindful of all it is, the beauty of nature, the awe of it. Like Einstein said, he says, I pause in wonder and stand wrapped in awe of the mysteriousness of life. And so that's pretty much what I try to do all my waking hours, whether I'm traveling or I'm at home or I'm at wherever I am. I try to really be as tuned in to every little vibration that I can. And when you're out, nature's just so much easier. You know, when you have cars running by and people yelling and honking horns and all that kind of stuff, it's more challenging. I mean, you can do it, but it's more challenging. When you're out in raw nature and you're the only one out there and there's no one around, it's so much easier. It allows you to practice at that level and then take that back with you. So I can take that experience and then use it in and I call it the trenches, when I'm in the trenches with all the other beings.
So it's a reset or a filling up of, so that you can be in the rest of the world.
Well, I think, too, it's as much as anything, it's exercising a muscle that we all have that we've forgotten about. And so that's a place where you can really exercise that muscle of mindfulness to a very high level because of just the demographics of where you are. But my aha moments haven't come in places. They have in those places, but like I said, the one I had, I was just sitting here at my desk with a book, and a lot of things that have happened to me have been like that. It's just that I so respect nature and honor it, that Mother Earth, that I just look at it as I have the means and I have the ability physically to experience these things, and I'm going to do it. I figure I'm only on here for whatever the gig lasts, and I'll be, as far as I'm concerned, I'll be running barefoot till I drop dead.
Why barefoot?
I got into earthing, the act of contacting the earth some years back, and it's on my website. You can read all about it. I've written a bunch of stuff on it, and there's a lot of science behind it. But for your health, earthing is where you're in direct contact with the surface of the earth. And from a biophysical standpoint, the biophysiology of it is that when you walk barefoot, you use all the muscles and ligaments and tendons and bones of your feet. And that is a natural shock absorber that actually prevents knee and ankle and hip and back injuries from happening. So there's a whole biophysiology to it. Then there's that's the biomechanics. And then there's the physiology and electromagnetic physiology, energetic aspect of the negative electron exchange between the earth and us, which scavenges free radicals. And I can get real scientific real quick here, but we don't need to do that. You can read all about it on the website on earthing and how important it is to you on mind, body, spirit to get reconnected with the earth for all three of those reasons, not just for the physical, but for mind, body, spirit connection. It's amazing. But until you do it, it's like the Buddha, you know, there's no word for it. Until you experience it, you can read all about it, you can study it and everything else, but you got to move your feet and literally take your shoes off and start doing it. So I've been doing it for 6 years now on all kinds of surfaces. I just got from Lake Tahoe. I was walking on ice for a half an hour at 15 degrees, and my feet were very happy. And
you just mentioned about the ice walking, but would you be on a trail earthing for miles and miles, or a shorter term thing, or how does that work?
It depends on the terrain. Some surfaces are very difficult, lots of pain. There's a pain element to this as well, in a very rough terrain. So you have to be careful, because if you get to a point where you're injuring yourself and you're way out in the middle of nowhere, it's not a good idea. You're it. You got to get back. Mm-hmm. So you have to be mindful about it. But I walked for hours when I was in the Andes this last time. I was 5 days trekking. And on the fourth day, I walked all day. I walked 12 hours with a backpack and at altitude, barefoot. And I was running, actually. We started downhill, then I could run. Uphill is a little, because of thin air and everything, it's a little more difficult. Mm-hmm. But I'm a good downhiller. I move very quickly downhill. That was probably that was the longest in a day, 10 or 12 hours barefooting. Because normally I'm around here. I only go out for a walk for an hour and a half. So I normally am not walking for a long period of time. But up there, the one day I walked nearly 12 hours barefoot.
Lots to learn from you, Dr. Blake. So can I ask you some short lightning round yes or no short answer questions?
Of course.
Do you think passion and purpose are the same things?
Passion and purpose. Well, my feeling about, again, I'm not a big word. I try to stay away from words as much as I can, as labels. But I would say, for me, when I ask the question, some people say, what do you do? What do you do? That's a common question. So what I've started asking is, what is your passion? And that, I feel, is your purpose.
Do you think everybody has a purpose?
Oh, yes. God don't make junk, and you're not here by mistake, believe me. It's just you getting out of the way and allowing your purpose, your passion, to manifest.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how important is following your personal joy and igniting your purpose?
10.
Did you ever quit your job to follow your purpose, and do you think somebody needs to quit?
Yes, I did. It wasn't if the universe slapped me down sick for 2 years to get me to stop. But I strongly support that.
What brings you great, great joy?
Peace. Being at peace.
If you unexpectedly amassed a good-sized fortune, what would you do differently?
Very little. I would continue on the same path. I'd just give more away.
And what should listeners learn from your life, Dr. Blake?
What I've gotten out of this, as I say, as Wally Amos says, in my 68 years nearly in the laboratory of life, is to be yourself. Always be true to yourself. Even when the natives are throwing spears and rocks at you because you're such a weirdo, just stay true to yourself and know within yourself that that's who you really are. It's not what people want you to be or you shoulda, coulda, woulda. Just be true to yourself, and you'll know that when you can get quiet with yourself, and no matter what's going on around you, you feel that inner peace, then you'll know.
For those people out there that are listening today that might be envious of your life and the way that you're living and your connection to something deeper, and they might just be beginning, what recommendations do you have for someone that's just beginning a spiritual path?
I always tell any of my students or friends or listeners, I always tell them, be grateful for baby steps. Each little step you take towards finding that sweet spot within yourself, which is you, is magic. So always value it, never belittle it, never say anything negative about yourself. It's just like the word jealous or envy. I've never experienced that in my life. Even when I had next to nothing, I mean, as far as possessions, I never can remember being envious or jealous. I was always happy that people could have things, and when they experience things, I'm happy for them. I figure I'm just blessed because I'm alive. And then as things went along, baby steps, lots and lots of baby steps to get to where I am now. I'm grateful for every one of them, and that's the message I would leave with everybody is be kind to yourself, take time, be patient, enjoy each little thing, just the fact that you can take a breath, you can smile, you can open the door, go to the bathroom, I don't care what it is. Make sure you're very, very grateful and you acknowledge it. Don't go, oh, it's like the old saying, if you snooze, you lose. And that's a good phrase. It means if you don't exercise a muscle, then at some point, because of your lack of gratitude, and it's not a judgment thing or a bad or a good, it's just being mindful of all your blessings. And even when they seem like they're all so small, they're just as important. Like, I forget which author, he said, a blade of grass is no less than the journey of the stars. And that's how each little baby step, think of it that same way, that a blade of grass is no less than the journey of the stars. And as my dear departed mother always said, if you don't shoot for the stars, you'll never get there.
So just one last very quick question. We've talked a lot about spirituality and Buddhism and unity and many aspects of religion and spirituality. But in one easy sentence, what are your spiritual beliefs?
Simply put, my spiritual beliefs are simply, actually one word would just be compassion. Being compassionate for all that is, and especially yourself. Being compassionate. So if you can just get your head around that, it's more challenging when you're around people like the Rev says that are sandpaper on your soul. It's more challenging, but that's why we're here. Is to just, as Thich Nhat Hanh said, he says, this is how I start the day. As soon as I awake and I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to enjoy each moment fully and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion.
I know I'm going to listen to this interview many, many times. Thank you for all the richness that you've put into it. You mentioned your website several times. I know people are going to want to go there and read all the good things that you have out there. Can you just tell us what's the best way to connect with you?
That's why I built the website many years ago, and I maintain it. It's free to anyone. I don't charge anything for people to go on my website. I have a newsletter you can sign up for, which I post periodically, just advice, suggestions for health for animals and people and the planet. I do have products on there that I've endorsed over the years. Very few, because I'm pretty picky about what I let my name get attached to. But it's a website that's simple. It's the only one, www.thepetwhisperer.com. And you pull it up. It'll come up first on Google. And then luckily I've had a great webmaster, Josh, who's helped me to make it as user-friendly as it can be. And so it has a lot of information in it to be shared. And all I ask in return is that you share that with everyone you know, the paying it forward. That's why I have it there, is because I know that by all of us helping each other, that we will have heaven on earth.
What a great note to end on. I'm very grateful for your time. Can I talk you into playing us on our way out another little round of the flute?
I feel you bending my arm back.
I'm trying.
I know, you're very good at it. But as you know, I'll play anytime. Just ask me.
You're very, very good at it.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just say, I don't like to say goodbye, so I'm going to say hasta luego. We'll call it until I see you again.
You've been listening to the Life Purpose Advisor podcast. Today it was my honor to interview Dr. Stephen Blake, who's playing for us in the background. Thank you so much for joining us today here on the Life Purpose Advisor podcast. We know that your time is limited and your life is busy. So we thank you so much for joining us and spending this hour with us today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. And if you'd like more help in finding your own life purpose, please visit us at www.lifepurposeadvisor.com. Have a wonderful day.